Thank you, dear. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. We're on page 5 of Teachings for Victory, Volume 2. And the Gosho that President Ikeda is giving a lecture on here is on practicing the Buddhist teachings. And we're in part 1 that will continue into part 2 and part 3. Last week we stopped on the challenge of propagating the mystic law in the latter day on page 5. And this turned out to be such an incredible segue from the opening of the eyes. I can't believe that this is what we're reading next. It just completely complements what we spent so much time reading previously and clarifies it further. So it's almost kind of a mystic thing that we picked this one up to continue. And right now in these next few paragraphs, he's going to emphasize the fact that on the Buddha's teachings and also the other Gosho on practicing on the Buddhist philosophy, on the Buddhist prophecy, are all from Sado Island right around the time that the opening of the eyes and the object of devotion for observing the mind were written. So these are major writings for his believers. He's basically saying they're kind of like while opening of the eyes and observing the mind are big long treatises. These are kind of summary kind of communications. They're to all followers though, still, just like both of those big major writings. So continuing on page 5, he says, the challenges of propagating the mystic law in the latter day. Okay? And there are lots of them, aren't there? We experience them. Are you experiencing any challenges in propagating the mystic law in the latter day?
Every day.
You are, I know. Anybody else? Anybody else?
Yes.
If any of you aren't, then get your shit together. You're not doing the right thing. Okay? You should all be facing challenges in propagating the mystic law in the latter day, because it's par for the course. That's what this whole Gosho is about. Do not be alarmed. These things will occur as a matter of course, and as a matter of fact, the fact that they occur is what's validating what you're doing as being the correct thing to do. Okay? He says, the challenges, on page 5, the challenges of propagating the mystic law in the latter day. On examination of the Lotus Sutra, we find that those who are born in this land and believe in this sutra, when it is propagated in the latter day of the law, will be subjected to hatred and jealousy, even greater than that which arose in the lifetime of the thus come one. Continue with President Ikeda's lecture. Dated the 5th month of 1273, on practicing the Buddhist teachings was composed at Ichinosara on Sado Island during Nichiren Daishonen's exile. As the postscript indicates, it is addressed to all my followers, along with the instruction, keep this letter with you at all times and read it over and over. Now, why would he say read it over and over? Does he think you don't have a good memory?
No.
No. Why does he say read it over and over?
To get in the depth of the...
Yes, to some degree, but as importantly as getting into the depths. When you've gotten into the depths, you don't need to keep reading it over and over because you've already brought forth that life condition. But when you're facing these challenges continuously, this is a source of encouragement to remind you, this is normal. This is par for the course. Don't be afraid. Don't be defeated. Have faith. Continue. No matter what. You took a vow. Okay? That's why you read it over and over again. Because your life condition as being a common mortal subjected to the rigors of the 9 worlds, you will not be in the 10th world of clarity or the 9th world of close to clarity. At different times. You're going to be dragged down by the influences, the function of the devil of the 6th heaven as often as the devil of the 6th heaven can win in that battle. Okay? That battle is going to absolutely occur the minute you start to function like the Buddha. Okay? So it's not going to go away. It's going to continue. All right? He says, keep this letter with you at all times and read it over and over. So take to heart what this message is and remember it for the whole course of your practice throughout your life. In this writing, Nichiren encourages his disciples to emulate his example. That's what this is about. He's writing about all the shitty stuff that I've had to face and overcome. And When you have to deal with the same types of things, don't lament them, and don't complain to me that you had to go through them. Okay? Because I had to go through them as an example to you to be prepared for what you would encounter. In this writing, Nietzsche encourages his disciples to emulate his example of practicing the Lotus Sutra as the Buddha teaches, and to diligently uphold their faith. All right? In his day, I sound like a Chicagoan whenever I do that. All right? In his day, by the way, I'm a Chicagoan. In his day, exile to Sada was tantamount to a death sentence. Most people condemned to this remote isle never returned alive. During his time there, Nichiren's life was in constant danger. On the Buddhist prophecy, dated 1 month later, which we already read as part of the preparation to read this, right? On the Buddhist prophecy, dated 1 month later, he writes, "The chances are 1 in 10,000 that I will survive the year or even the month." Undaunted by indescribable hardships and privations, Nichiren proclaimed his struggle as the Buddha of the latter day of the law to illuminate the darkness shrouding humankind with the light of universal enlightenment. Now, what does that mean? What does that say? One sentence. I'll read it again. Undaunted by indescribable hardships and privation, Nichiren proclaimed his struggle as the Buddha of the latter day of the law to illuminate the darkness shrouding humankind with the light of universal enlightenment. What does that say?
This is the proof that he is the Buddha.
This
Because experiencing this hardship.
actually, yes. But what he's also doing is he's clarifying to his followers what to expect. Remember, a paragraph above, I said, in this writing, Nichiren encourages his disciples to emulate his example of practicing the Lotus Sutra exactly as the Buddha teaches, right? Here he's saying the same thing. Undaunted by indescribable hardships and privations. So what's the lesson there? No matter what, right?
Yeah.
Nichiren proclaims his struggle as the Buddha of the latter day of the law. Are you also Buddhas in the latter day of the law? Yes. To illuminate, why does he proclaim this struggle? To scare the shit out of you?
No.
To warn you?
No.
To allow you to perceive that reality as the Buddha perceives that reality. That's called to illuminate. That's to brighten the darkness. That's to make clear. Do you understand? Without the living example, it's theoretical. It's just somebody decided to write a bunch of shit that they didn't have to go through, but you do. Right? How cool is that? That's not cool. All right? So he's saying, undaunted, which is doubt-free faith, we're supposed to be undaunted too. By indescribable hardships and privations, that means no matter what. Nichiren proclaimed his struggle as the Buddha of the latter day of the law to illuminate the darkness shrouding humankind. What's the darkness shrouding humankind?
Ignorance.
Ignorance of the Buddha nature.
Nature.
Ignorance of the Buddha nature that exists in all things. With the light of universal enlightenment, which is that truth, okay, that the darkness was obscuring. The previous year, in the second month of 1272, he had composed the opening of the eyes. So this is all like, I don't know if I'm going to live to get off this island, but I better start piling up the lessons that I want to be maintained throughout the course of Mappo. Right?
Right.
He had composed the opening eyes, which reveals the object of devotion in terms of the person. This was followed in the fourth month of 1273, just 1 month prior to on practicing the Buddhist teaching. So just a month prior to him writing this, he had just written on the object of devotion for observing the mind. Just a year before, he had written opening of the eyes, and just a month before also, he had written, or a month later, he writes on the Buddhist prophecy. Okay? So it's like boom, 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 in this 2-year period. which reveals the object of devotion for observing the mind, which reveals the object of devotion in terms of the law. All right? Which, with the completion of these two important treatises, which are the two legs of Nichiren Buddhism, Nichiren had established the doctrinal framework for his teaching for the enlightenment of all people into the eternal future. What's he saying there? With those two doctrines, he had opened the way to what? Yes, of course, but what is Kosen Rufu reflective of? The attainment of Buddhahood in their present form by ordinary common mortals. Do you understand? Okay, the framework for his teaching for the enlightenment of all people into the eternal future. That's all people revealing their true identity as Buddhas. Okay? As bodhisattvas of the earth. Because they're all in the latter day. Right? On the rest was now up to his disciples. Because again, he creates the teaching, it's up to us to be the arms, the legs, and the mouth. Yeah. He knew that everything would hinge on the example that he left and the individuals genuinely committed to the correct teaching that would follow him. Do you understand? I added some words there, but that's what he's saying. In other words, he's guaranteeing Kosen Rufu will occur, knowing that the people that will accomplish it have not even been born yet. That's a pretty bold statement, isn't it? Whoa. Individuals genuinely committed to the correct teaching. If such dedicated disciples rose to action, Kosen Rufu could be achieved without fail. His conviction is vividly conveyed in On Practicing the Buddha's Teachings and On the Buddha's Prophecy. These two writings could be viewed as his enduring guidance for all his disciples, with the full conviction that we're going to attain Kosen Rufu. That all people are going to be able to give rise to their true identity. That is what Kosen Rufu is. We're going to get into that at the bottom. It's all people. All right? On Practicing the Buddhist Teachings represents an impassioned call to his disciples, us, who devote themselves selflessly to the law, us, as practicing as he practiced. If selflessly to the law means you're practicing in the same mind as Nichiren. You want me to move over this way a little bit? This way a little bit. Okay. He urges them that now is the time to stand up and undertake the practice to refute the erroneous teachings rampant in the realm of Buddhism. What did he just say there? It's so clear. On Practicing the Buddhist Teachings represents an impassioned call to his disciples who devote themselves selflessly to the law. He urges them that now is the time to stand up and undertake the practice to refute the erroneous teachings rampant in the realm of Buddhism. Now is the time to do shakabuku. Now is the time to do shakabuku. It is no longer the time for shoju. Okay, I didn't mean to scare you, but that was absolutely correct.
I'm not scared,
okay. On the Buddhist Prophecy, by contrast, is about articulating the ideal of the westward transmission of the correct Buddhist teaching and his widespread propagation throughout the world in the distant future. It's about Kosen Rufu happening based on the actions of his disciples. Okay, living their life according to his teaching, living their life according to his example. Okay, as Bodhisattva Jogyo, that example. In other words, the grand vision of Nichiren's Buddhism of the people, a teaching for the enlightenment of all humanity, for everyone equally, can only be realized when there are genuine disciples who strive for Kosen Rufu, like Nichiren, or with the same mind as Nichiren. How many times have I said that? Huh? There's President Ikeda saying it. That is why he calls on his disciples to take on the noble task of advancing Kosen Rufu in the latter day without begrudging their lives. That's why he says, I'm asking you to be ready to die for this. That's the correct attitude. That's how I've pursued it. I'm not a bad guy. I'm not asking you to die for something that's not worthwhile. He's saying that is why he calls on all his disciples to take on the noble task of advancing Kosen Rufu in the latter day without begrudging their lives. At the beginning of this writing, Nichiren states, those who are born in this land and believe in this sutra, when it is propagated in the latter day of the law, okay, we're all born there and under those circumstances for a reason.
Right.
And they will be subjugated to hatred and jealousy even greater than that which arose in the lifetime of the thus come one. This is based on the Lotus Sutra passage, since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world. How much more so will this be after his passing? His purpose in making this statement is to deepen his followers' awareness of their mission to propagate the mystic law in this latter age and to prepare them for the opposition they are bound to incur along the way. This is written to the Bodhisattvas of the earth then, isn't it? This is written to those that are of the same mind as him. Others may read it, but only those of the same mind will be inspired and act upon it. Those faint-hearted and afraid of hardship cannot realize the momentous undertaking of Kosen Rufu, nor are they entrusted with that task. Understand that. True disciples are given that task. True disciples are those who stand up with the same ardent commitment as Nichiren to guide people to enlightenment, and who have the dauntless strength to face obstacles head on with selfless dedication. The joy of struggling together with one's mentor, sharing the same purpose, is also a source of boundless strength that helps one rise above all manner of hardships. Shall I read that again? Yes. True disciples are those who stand up with the same ardent commitment as Nichiren, same mind as Nichiren, to guide people to enlightenment, which isn't just to teach them the teaching, is it? Because that won't be enough. It's to guide them in the practice, and it's also to be an example to them, to show them how to overcome devilish functions and be the Buddha in their present form. Do you understand? So he's saying, Nichiren, to guide people to enlightenment and who have the dauntless strength to face obstacles like him head on with selfless, that means not begrudging their life, not worrying about their body. Do not begrudge their life. That's what head on, that's what selfless dedication is, right? The joy of struggling together with one's mentor, sharing the same purpose, is also a source of boundless strength. You know, no matter how many times I face difficulty, the stories that I am well aware of that are true, that I've experienced in my own life, act as encouragement to me at that moment. But also the stories of my mentor and my mentors who overcame difficulties also provide me with the predication to have faith and courage in moments of weakness or self-doubt. Do you understand? Because we're all connected. There's no separation between their victories and my victories. All right? The joy of struggling together with one's mentor, sharing the same purpose, is also a source of boundless strength that helps one rise above all manner of hardships. In the next passage, Nichiren explains why Lotus Sutra practitioners are destined. What does destined mean? Cannot avoid. Cannot avoid. In the next passage, Nichiren explains why Lotus Sutra practitioners are destined to encounter far more intense opposition in the evil age of the latter day than during Shakyamuni's time. There are significant differences between the two ages. First, the person expounding the law in Shakyamuni's day was the Buddha, whereas the person expounding the law in the latter day is an ordinary practitioner. He made this point in the Gosho, if that sounds familiar. That's because he said that straight up. Also, the disciples in Shakyamuni's time, this is also straight from the Gosho, were great bodhisattvas and arhats, while the disciples in the latter day come from among evil people, defiled by the three poisons. Even during the time when the Buddha preached the law and his teachings were practiced by outstanding disciples, many hatred and were jealous of him. What's that? Even during the time when the Buddha preached the law. Is it hated? Okay, hated. That's why I said it. Even during the time when the Buddha preached the law and his teachings were practiced by outstanding disciples, many hated and were jealous of him and his community of believers. Nichiren notes that it is only natural, therefore, that even greater hostility and resentment should arise in the latter day when the law is beginning. That even greater hostility and resentment should arise in the latter day when the law is being expounded by a teacher who is ostensibly an ordinary practitioner, and his disciples are people whose lives are steeped in the three poisons: greed, anger, and foolishness. I messed that up, but everybody understands, right? It's going to be easy to doubt it when it's Nichiren and us rather than a famous, priest from historical Buddhism and a bunch of priestly people talking about it. He therefore notes, people shun the good teacher and associate with evil teachers. Even though people may have the fortune to encounter the good teacher is the teacher teaching the teaching of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay, even though people may have the fortune to encounter the good teacher, Nichiren Daishonin, their inability to properly distinguish between good and evil, true and false, causes them to distance themselves from him in favor of erroneous teachers. That is the sad reality of the latter day. Everybody understands. They don't embrace the Buddhism of the sowing. They embrace the various forms of the Buddhism of the harvest, or the wrong understanding of the teaching of the Buddhism of the sowing. As a matter of fact, what Nichikan qualified is that the Buddhism of the sowing is only known to the Fuji school. Okay, so Nichiren Shu, Kimpon Hokke Shu, all those other Nichiren, they don't recognize the Buddhism of the sowing. Buddhism of the sowing comes from the understanding that transpired along the lineage of Nikko Nikko all the way through the 26th high priest Nichikan, who is the one who really qualified the Buddhism of the sowing in differentiation. Do you remember when I talked about all this? You should go see those videos. Watch those videos more often. Now, all of this is there. All right? Where am I? No matter what happens? Okay. No matter what happens, be fearless. What is more, once you become a disciple, this is from the Gosho itself. What is more, once you become a disciple or lay supporter of the votary who practices the true Lotus Sutra in accord with the Buddha's teachings, you are bound to face the three types of enemies. Therefore, from the very day you listen to and take faith in this sutra, you should be fully prepared to face the great persecutions of the three types of enemies that are certain to be more horrible now after the Buddha's passing. Although my disciples had already heard this when both great and small persecutions confronted us, some were astounded and terrified. Some were so astounded and terrified that they even forsook their faith. Did I not warn you in advance? I have been teaching you day and night directly from the sutra, which says, since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? This passage has become an unforgettable point of reference for me. Shortly after having my fateful encounter with Mr. Toda and embarking on the path of faith as a Soka Gakkai member, I took these golden words to heart and engraved them in my life. Nichiren clearly states that those who practice as the Buddha teaches, are bound to be assailed by the three powerful enemies and meet with persecutions even more severe than those during Shakyamuni's lifetime. As a young man, I accepted this and resolved to dedicate myself to Kosen Rufu, and this is the same as me. I didn't think I was Daisaku Ikeda, and I certainly wasn't Shakabuku by Josei Toda. But I took the same vow on my own, from what I was reading in the Gosho. I accepted this and resolved to dedicate myself to Kosen Rufu with the spirit of a revolutionary, ready to give up his life for the cause if need be. I was the disciple of Mr. Toda, a great leader of Kosen Rufu who had gone to prison for his beliefs and who had waged a heroic spiritual struggle. I knew that casting my lot with such a mentor would most certainly mean facing great persecutions on the path ahead, and I fervently vowed that I would remain fearless at such times. Now, for me personally, I got that same spirit out of what I was reading Nichiren say in the Gosho. Okay? And so my whole thing was like, Nichiren was burying me in so much unbelievable benefit. I mean, seriously, I got benefit like nobody else that I knew. I got benefit like Jesus Christ. Okay, seriously. I could turn water into wine for a period of time in my life, which was the right time because that's what cemented my faith no matter what. Okay? But again, this process is a function of dependent origination. It doesn't mean that I'm better than anybody else. I mean, it's an extension. Do you realize all of this merit is extended? All of this merit is connected. Do you follow? All of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is one thing. It's not a bunch of separated things. There is no separation. Okay? As teachers, there is no separation between us. Nichiren makes this as clear as he possibly can by constantly mentioning us every time he mentions himself. Okay? That means if he's a teacher, we're a teacher. Right? We are the teachers of Kosen Rufu in the latter day. Understand that. We are not something to be trifled with. Don't put yourself down. No matter what happens, be fearless. Okay, in this passage, Nichiren rebukes the inner weakness of those disciples who foolishly allow themselves to be defeated by fear and cowardice and abandon their faith when persecutions large and small appear. Okay? So what did I just read prior to that? I had just... what did I get lost somewhere? Yeah, I did. I was just over here talking about...
Yes.
A spirit of a revolutionary. Okay, I didn't get lost. All right. I knew that at the bottom of page 7, I knew that casting my lot with such a mentor would certainly mean facing great persecutions on the path ahead. Now, what's he specifically referring to there? He knew that President Toda was President Toda. Who's the guy that he met? Did he meet towering Josei Toda, who started from prison and created... 750,000 households. That was by the end of his life. Yes. Okay, that isn't who he met when he was 19 years old. Who he met when he was 19 years old was somebody trying to regain their health after having almost died himself in prison. It was so difficult. He barely survived it. It took President Makaguchi's life. Okay, he also knew that the Soka Gakkai as an organization was small. What's President Toda constantly talking about? The old organization and how we're rebuilding it. He's constantly referring to Mr. Makaguchi. Okay? He's trying to create an understanding that it doesn't take a genius, if you're following what's being said, is slightly different than what Nichiren Shoshu at the Fuji School is handing down. They're not teaching shakabuku and doing all kinds of activities and meetings during the week. No, they want you to come to the temple on Sunday and listen to an oko and leave an offering. These daily examples of life, this daily life example only occurred with the Soka Gakkai. Okay? So, he's saying, I knew that casting my lot with such a mentor would most certainly mean facing great persecutions on the path ahead. And I fervently vowed that I would remain fearless at such times. In this passage that we were referring to earlier, Nichiren rebukes the inner weakness of those disciples who foolishly allow themselves to be defeated by fear and cowardice and abandon their faith when persecutions small and large appear. What's that? That's what I asked a minute ago. What's he talking about there? That's being defeated. That's giving up. That's not no matter what. No matter what means you never hit that spot.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So, page 8. Mr. Toda was incredibly strict when he lectured on this passage, because there's no room for not understanding this point. I recall one such instance at a study session he led in a small room at his company offices in Tokyo's Ichigaya area. Okay, so where is he having his little meetings? In his office. There are no community centers. There's not some big Soka Gakkai Kaikan. Understand that these are the circumstances that this whole huge worldwide organization were actually founded around. He led in a small room at his company's offices in Tokyo's Ichigaya area. He spoke with great passion, determined to impress upon his true-hearted disciples the rigorous path of practicing Nichiren Buddhism. The rigorous path of practicing Nichiren Buddhism. No matter what happens, be fearless, he taught them. Never retreat even a single step, because you're going to face adversity, he's teaching them. He said his guidance was so strict because he had faithfully inherited Nichiren's spirit, and he knew what was ahead for them. If they were going to survive it as he had, they had to practice as he had. All right? I remember being genuinely, intensely struck with and inspired by his words, learning for the first time the rigor and commitment of genuine faith, and how the true purpose of the Soka Gakkai activities perfectly accords with Nichiren's teachings. Because what is the true purpose of Soka Gakkai activities? Kosen Rufu, it is not to build the Soka Gakkai organization. The Soka Gakkai organization being built is an outflow of the effort to Kosen Rufu, to achieve Kosen Rufu, not the other way around. One doesn't build the other. All right? At the end of this passage, Nichiren says, because to only care about growing the organization, you lose sight of all this. The organization becomes an end of itself. Kosen Rufu is a banner. Kosen Rufu is a phrase. Kosen Rufu isn't viewed as something that's real that we're in the process of achieving. Okay? We're more concerned about keep the organization breathing. How about Kosen Rufu? I remember being intensely struck and inspired by his words, learning for the first time the rigor and commitment of genuine faith and how the true purpose of Soka Gakkai activities perfectly accords with Nichiren's teachings. At the end of this passage, Nichiren says that he has been telling his followers day and night about the sutra's warning. Since hatred and jealousy toward the sutra abound, even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? It is solely out of the wish for his disciples to remain fearless in the face of persecution that he has repeatedly done so. As for the three powerful enemies, these are manifestations of the workings of the devil king of the sixth heaven, or heavenly devil, the most fearful of the three obstacles and four devils. As the teacher waging an unremitting battle against the onslaughts of these enemies, Nichiren constantly warned his followers that they were certain to encounter obstacles far worse than those experienced during Shakyamuni's time. Nevertheless, some grew faint-hearted and stopped practicing. It got to the point, Nichiren writes, where 999 out of 1,000 people gave up their faith. That's from the reply to Niyayama. Whether disciples triumph over devilish functions or are defeated by them will have a decisive impact on the spread of the mystic law in the latter day. Everybody gets that? What's it saying? Kosen Rufu is up to you. That's exactly what that said. Kosen Rufu is up to you. Whether the disciples triumph over devilish functions or are defeated by them will have a decisive impact on the spread of the mystic law in the latter day. Nothing is more painful for the teacher than to see disciples defeated by such obstacles. Because there's nothing you can say to tell people to persevere. They have to be able to persevere. That's not something you can teach somebody. You can show them by example. But to have the guts to go through bad shit and not stop, that's something that only comes from inside of you. Okay? That's only you can decide to be that kind of person. Okay? In the opening of the eyes, Nichiren writes, although I and my disciples may encounter various difficulties, if we do not harbor doubts in our hearts, we will as a matter of course attain Buddhahood. Do not have doubts simply because heaven does not lend you protection. Do not be discouraged because you do not enjoy an easy and more secure existence in this life. This is what I have taught my disciples morning and evening, and yet they begin to harbor doubts and abandon their faith. Foolish men are likely to forget the promises they have made when the crucial moment comes. This passage describes how easy it is for people to grow faint-hearted when actually faced with hardship or persecution. When such difficulties arise, that is the crucial moment when our faith is put to the test. Top of page 9. The true nature of the battle between the provisional and the true teachings. From the Gosho, this is indeed an accursed time to live in this land. However, the Buddha has commanded me to be born in this age, and it is impossible for me to go against the decree of the Dharma King. And so, as the sutra dictates, I have launched the battle between the provisional and the true teachings. Donning the armor of endurance and girding myself with the sword of the wonderful teaching, I have raised the banner of the 5 characters of Myoho Rengekyo, the heart of the entire 8 volumes of the Lotus Sutra. Then, drawing the bow of the Buddha's declaration, I have not yet revealed the truth, and notching the arrow of honestly discarding the provisional teachings, I have mounted the carriage drawn by the great white ox and battered down the gates of the provisional teachings. Attacking first one and then another, I have refuted opponents from the 8 and 10 schools, such as the Nembutsu, True Word, Zen, and Precepts. Some have fled headlong, while others have retreated, and still others have been captured to become my disciples. I continue to repulse their attacks and to defeat them, but legions of enemies exist to oppose the single Dharma King and the handful who follow him. Pardon me. I continue to repulse their attacks and to defeat them, but legions of enemies exist who oppose the single Dharma King and the handful who follow him. So the battle goes on even today. Nichiren Daishonin declared that he had set in motion the battle between the provisional teachings and the true teaching. Earlier, he proposes an answer to the question held by many, including some of his followers, namely why those who practice the Lotus Sutra as the Buddha teaches should face fierce opposition from the 3 powerful enemies, even though the sutra assures them of peace and security in this existence. He offers the following 3 perspectives. This is important because you're going to notice that. It's going to seem like by the time I'm done reading part 1, we kind of covered the whole Gosho, but there are 3 parts to this Gosho, right? I believe that they're delineated here. So pay attention. He goes, this is actually, he says, he offers the following 3 perspectives within this Gosho. First, he cites the examples of Buddhist practitioners of the past, such as Shakyamuni, Bodhisattva never disparaging, who represents Shakyamuni in a previous lifetime, the Chinese priest Chu Taosheng, the Tripitaka master Fat Tao, the venerable Arashima, the great teacher Tentai of China, the great teacher Dengyo of Japan, and others. Though all were votaries of the Lotus Sutra who practiced according to the Buddhist teachings, he notes, they each encountered great persecution. We all remember that from reading the Gosho, right? Second, Nichiren explains a true votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day undertakes the battle between the provisional and true teaching in accord with the Buddha's decree and carries out extensive activities to propagate the mystic law. This is the passage we are presently discussing. Third, he declares that a genuine votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day aspires for the realization of an ideal society, embodying the principle that both the person and the law are unaging and eternal. He further clarifies that this ideal society will perfectly match the Lotus Sutra's description of peace and security in this existence. The passage we are currently considering, which represents the second perspective, elucidates the essence of Nichiren's own struggles as the sutra's votary. He indicates that, far from simply waiting to be subjected to hardships, he has actively embarked on the battle between the provisional and true teachings. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. All right. The latter day is summed up by the line, "This is the age of conflict in which the pure law has been lost." And I qualified that before. The pure law, don't freak out. He's not talking about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. He's talking about the Myoho Renge-kyo of the Buddhism of the Harvest. Mm-hmm. In other words, the latter day is a time when Buddhism falls into serious decline and all but perishes. Confusion reigns as to what constitutes the Buddha's correct teaching, with rival schools incessantly quarreling and disputing the validity of the different teachings they advocate. In addition to this confusion and disorder in the realm of Buddhism, people also become confused and disordered, and the land is imperiled as a result. In such an age when the law is on the brink of disappearing from society, the Lotus Sutra's votaries take on the challenge of refuting error in the realm of Buddhism and upholding the correct teaching in order to prevent it from being lost forever. Boy, have you all got a big freaking job. A big important job. What did that just say? Do you think that was talking about anybody but you? Mm-hmm. No, it wasn't talking about only you, but it's definitely talking about all of you. Mm-hmm. In such an age when the law is on the brink of disappearing from society, the Lotus Sutra's votaries take on the challenge of refuting error in the realm of Buddhism and upholding the correct teaching. Well, you got to know what the correct teaching is to uphold it, don't you? Mm-hmm. You can't do that without studying to understand what the correct teaching is. Yes. Right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's you. Votaries take on the challenge of refuting error in the realm of Buddhism and upholding the correct teaching in order to prevent it from being lost forever. That's the consequence if we don't stand up. They also uphold the ideal of establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land. They are of the same mind as Nichiren, and they think Kosen Rufu is as serious as a heart attack. It's not a slogan. Okay? It's not a wishful idealism. It's an absolute thing that is absolutely going to occur because it's the Buddha's will, period. Okay? Mm-hmm. And those people that believe that from the tip of their toes to the top of their head are going to be born, and they're going to do what they got to do to contribute to that. And it will never be lost forever as a result of that. Mm-hmm. As a result of those people making their advent and serving and functioning as teachers of the correct teaching. The correct teaching will not be lost, cannot be lost. Dependent origination. Okay? They also uphold the ideal of establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land in order to free people from suffering and to put a halt to the country's ruin. This is what it means to practice as the Buddha teaches. In the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni addresses his Bodhisattva disciples and urges them to undertake this struggle after his passing. President Ikeda is doing that right now to us. Okay? Hence, Nichiren refers above to the command of the Buddha and the decree of the Dharma king. And we're hearing it now. In the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni states that among his teachings, there are those he expounded as expedient means, the provisional teachings, or the three vehicles, and one that contains his true intent, the true teaching, or the one vehicle. He then instructs that after his passing, his disciples should honestly discard the expedient teachings and spread the one vehicle of the Lotus Sutra. It is, therefore, the duty of the votaries of the Lotus Sutra who appear in the latter day, when the law is in danger of disappearing, to carry on the battle between the provisional and true teaching, so as to make a clear distinction between them, as Nichiren did. The purpose of this battle is solely to prevent the correct teaching from perishing, not to show everybody how much more you know than them. Okay? Those who clarify the differences between the provisional teachings and true teaching in the latter day, when the Buddha's teachings are in complete disarray, are certain to incur resentment and hostility from the established Buddhist schools and teachers, whose religious authority is based on the claimed supremacy of various provisional sutras. It is sure to unleash a storm of criticism, misunderstanding, and persecution. Consequently, those who wage this battle must do so with the recognition that this is an accursed time, and don the armor of endurance so that they can withstand, so that they're able to survive the inevitable fierce onslaughts. The most powerful weapon in this battle is the Lotus Sutra itself. It's the teaching in which the Buddha clearly distinguished between the provisional teachings and the true teaching. Hence, Nichiren uses the expression, the sword of the wonderful teaching. Nothing can cut through or refute error as incisively as the Buddha's own words. The practice of refuting erroneous teachings in the realm of Buddhism is ultimately a struggle of compassion fought with the force of reason. I'll say it again. The practice of refuting erroneous teachings in the realm of Buddhism is ultimately a struggle of compassion fought with the force of reason. It's not about showing people you know more than them or proving to them that they're right, they're wrong, and you're right. All right? It's to persuade them toward the correct understanding of the law. It's done with the compassion of the bodhisattva, okay? Not the animality of the third world. If we were to be waged with anything other than reason, for example, authority or brute force, then it would be not the battle of ideas commanded by the Buddha. So, if it's an organization that's giving top-down orders without teaching or giving any validity to the predication of why things need to be that way, then it would not be the battle of ideas commanded by the Buddha. Everybody catch what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Resorting to such means would be a negation of Buddhism itself. This is Daisaku Ikeda talking here. Resorting to such means would be a negation of Buddhism itself, indicative of the most deplorable decline of the law in the latter day. Take note of him making that declarative statement. That's why we sit around the table. The banner of the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo, the heart of the entire 8 volumes of the Lotus Sutra, refers to Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the essence of the Lotus Sutra. It is the banner of these forces who champion the correct teaching. It is the banner of propagation of the Lotus Sutra, the real aspect of the Gohonzon, carried by the practitioners who widely proclaim the mystic law, a teaching of universal enlightenment, that everybody has the Buddha nature, and refute error that plunges people into suffering. The 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo constitute the name of the Buddha nature of all living beings. How many times have you heard me say that? You're calling it out. You're calling that name, right? The 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo constitute the name of the Buddha nature of all living beings. It's the name of the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. And chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the practice that makes it possible for both ourselves and others to manifest this Buddha nature from within. This means that each of us has the power to unfurl the banner of victory in our lives. Ultimately, the battle between the provisional and true teachings is a struggle for human victory, one in which we aim, through chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, based on strong faith in the mystic law, that means in strong faith in the Gohonzon, to overcome all suffering and misfortune. To overcome all suffering and misfortune, that means things that we're experiencing in a given moment that we're not liking, okay, that is making us feel oppressed or defeated. that is diminishing our sense of being the Buddha. Okay? Through chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, based on strong faith in the mystic law, we are to overcome all suffering and misfortune and open the way to happiness for everyone by being that living example of the person that can turn poison into medicine. Do you understand? That isn't weak and screwed and in need of somebody to save them. The practitioner that saves themselves. Because of the oneness of the correct teaching, the oneness of the law, the oneness of the Buddha and the disciple. The votary who holds aloft the banner of the 5 characters of Myoho Renge Kyo, the votary who practices as the Buddha did, all right, can shoot down the workings of devilish functions by employing the bow and arrow of the Buddha's words, I have not yet revealed the truth, and honestly discarding the provisional teachings. Do you understand that? What'd that just say then? The votary who upholds the banner of the 5 characters of Myoho Renge Kyo, okay, who is that? That's all of us. That's all the bodhisattvas there is propagating the Buddhism and sowing, right? Can shoot down the workings of devilish functions, okay, can overcome and defeat those things that we were talking about, suffering and misfortune, right? Right. Okay, by employing the bow and arrow of the Buddha's words, by employing the practice of the true practitioner, which is not only Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, but refuting error. Okay, understand that. That's the bow. That's what he's taught. That's why he's not just saying by chanting. That's why he's not just saying by chanting. You can't do it just by chanting. Okay? If it was just by chanting, all I would ever tell anybody, just chant. Why do you need to know shit? Just chant. You need to know everything so that you can use your bow to refute error and honestly discard the provisional teachings. You can't do that without understanding. Do you agree?
Makes sense.
Makes sense, right?
Right.
So he's saying, the votary who holds aloft the banner of the 5 characters, the practices of the same mind as Nichiren, can shoot down all of their obstacles they will encounter by employing the refutation of shakabuku in their daily life. That's what that says. All right? By employing the bow and arrow of the Buddha's words, I have not yet revealed the truth, and honestly discarding provisional teachings. You follow? That is shakabuku. Also, the carriage drawn by the great white ox signifies the one vehicle of the Lotus Sutra that can carry all people to the destination of enlightenment. It is a vehicle magnificent in size and grandeur, imparting boundless peace of mind to all who ride in it. It can travel freely anywhere, unrestrictedly, in order to free people from suffering. Nichiren says, I have mounted the carriage drawn by the great white ox and battered down the gates of the provisional teachings. Attacking first one and then the other, I have refuted opponents. So the battle goes on even today. This passage conveys his dynamism and boundless vigor. It brims with the unrestrained passion and energy to fight tirelessly for Kosen Rufu. His words are meant to sweep away all doubt regarding why those who practice the Lotus Sutra as the Buddha teaches do not enjoy peace and security in their present existence. SGI members' activities since the pioneering days of our movement reflect the same vigor and strength Nichiren conveys here. Discussing this passage, Mr. Toda said, we mustn't let harmful errors go unchallenged. We must stay on the offensive against them, continuing to press forward and thoroughly refuting them. Mr. Toda was a leader dedicated to guiding all people to true and lasting happiness. He was also a great warrior determined to refute the erroneous and reveal the true in the realm of Buddhism. Everybody understands what that is now, right? Yes? It's to practice correctly with the same mind as Nichiren. Okay? Honestly discarding expedient means not accepting even a word of the provisional teachings. Only the Lotus Sutra, only the Buddhism of the sowing. All right? Mr. Toda was a leader dedicated to guiding all people to true and lasting happiness. He was also a great warrior, determined to refute the erroneous and reveal the true in the realm of Buddhism. A true practitioner, he always brimmed with this spirit, the spirit of refutation, the spirit of shakabuku, to do battle against error and wrongdoing by knowing what is error and wrongdoing and refuting it. It's a matter of it's a function of your practice. You get?
Yes.
All right. In this passage, Nichiren also speaks of repulsing the attacks of enemies and defeating them. I would especially like our youth division members to emulate this spirit and have the unflagging determination to eradicate to eradicate all roots of evil that cause people suffering and misery. To achieve Kosen Rufu, we need to defeat the devilish nature or negativity that resides and proliferates in the human heart. At the end of this passage, Nichiren writes, legions of enemies exist to oppose the single Dharma king and the handful who follow him. So the battle goes on even today. The first three Soka Gakkai presidents connected by the bonds of mentor and disciple have always taken action with the unwavering resolve to keep fighting for Kosen Rufu. Amid rising Japanese militarism, Mr. Makaguchi boldly stood up alone to revive Nichiren Buddhism in modern times. Mr. Toda also stood up alone amid the devastation of post-war Japan to rebuild the Soka Gakkai and achieve the membership goal of 750,000 households. And I, the third president, stood up alone as Mr. Toda's disciple and embarked on a momentous journey for worldwide Kosen Rufu. Kosen Rufu is a continuous struggle between the forces of the Buddha and devilish functions. Indeed, the battle goes on even today. The true brilliance of the life state of Buddhahood shines in this spirit of unceasing challenge, as clearly illustrated by those who practice in accord with the Buddha's teachings. So I got 3 more pages. You want to stop there? Shall I stop there until next week? Okay, next week we're going to continue on then into part 2, for sure. So we'll start on page 12. We'll continue on page 12, Tenacious Dialogue and Shining Humanity, and we'll swing right on into part 2 on page 19 after we complete part 1 on page 15. So we start on 12, we do 12 and a half. Okay?
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.